Caleb. This is your Aunt Rita. As you get to watch, you get to see my furious packing and unpacking, organizing and deorganizing in the entrails of stuff behind me. Apparently moving to New York is a little bit more complicated than I thought it was. Anyway, I want to talk to you about your future. This is your graduation present from me. And I want to talk to you about what to expect. It is easy for someone who is, say, a good student, or even an above average student, or even just an average student. It's easy for someone who's been to school, who has learned the system of school, and done okay in that system, to think that, okay, well, when I enter life as an adult, it's going to be just a bigger version of that. I'm going to have more freedom, more power, but I'm going to know the system and I'm going to be okay. Well, that's true. You are going to know the system. But there are going to be multiple systems you're going to learn. For example, you're going to need to know things like bookkeeping and accounting, no matter what you do. Whether you are an employee or a business owner, whether you're an entrepreneur or someone who just likes to be a waiter or somebody on an assembly line or anything like that. Whatever kind of person you want to be in your future, you always need to know bookkeeping and accounting, because you need to know how to keep the books of your family business, which is right now it's just you. As an adult, it's just you. You have a one-person business. You need to know how to keep the books for that business. When you get together with someone and you have kids with them, or even if you just get together with someone, it's now a two-person business. But there's still the business of the family, okay? If we're talking about something like, if you're just an employee, even if you don't become a business owner, which, by the way, it's practically mandatory if you become a business owner, but even if you're just an employee, you still need to understand what the books are, what the accounting is. Because if you're an employee at a company and you're not sure if the company is about to go down, and there's a rumor going through the company, well, all you have to do is go look at the financials of the business in which you work. And if you understand the financials, if you're looking at the footnotes, which is where accountants hide all of their mistakes, if you understand the numbers and the columns and what they all mean, then you actually know whether or not the company is going down or going up, or just going through a transition. You actually know what the reality of the situation is. You can plan accordingly. Even if you don't want to become a business owner or an entrepreneur in your future, even if you like the position of being an employee, just being a good hard worker who gets the job done and takes care of your particular cog in the machine, that is really important. We absolutely need all those. Even if that's the case, you still need to know things like bookkeeping and accounting. You need to know things like insurance. You need to know things like moral principles. One of the things you're going to learn is that other adults, now that you're an adult, now that you're going to be out on your own, other adults, some of them are just at peace and happy, and some of them are angsty and upset, and it will shock you, the variety of deep contentment all the way down to deep misery, and everything along the spectrum. It will shock you, and it will amaze you that it happens to all types of people. People like me and Nolan, who are really like bold, in your face type of people. We can be very deeply content, or we can be very deeply miserable, or at any point along the spectrum. And the same thing with people who are just light and easygoing, and they just want to get along with everyone, and they just care about everyone feeling accepted and stuff like that. Even those people, they can be very deeply content or very deeply miserable, or any point along the spectrum. No one is exempt from being at any point along that spectrum. So one of the things you're going to find out is that knowing moral principles, understanding that there is an integrity to business. There's an honesty to transactions that you conduct with other people, whether it's a business transaction, whether it's a relationship transaction, whether you are going out with someone on a date, or whether you are selling someone a service or a product in your business. Whatever the case is, whatever you're doing, you're gonna need to see that people who try to get around the system, people who try to manipulate the system, at most that works one time, and almost always it works because everything else that they're doing is in fact honest. And then after the one time, they've burned that bridge and they can't do it again, and they're not trusted again, and it compromises how much faith they have in the system of honesty and integrity. You see where it starts to have an upward spiral or a downward spiral depending upon how you treat the system. If you treat the system with openness and honesty and integrity and forthrightness and being, accountable to yourself and not blaming other people for bad situations, just seeing that, oh, here's a situation where there's something wrong, let's fix the situation. Or there's something in me that's wrong, but I don't yet know what it is, so right now I'm doing what I can. Something like that, that's far more honest than being like, well, so-and-so did this problem, and such happened, and we don't know how that happened, and who cares, Or, there's nothing wrong with me, if they don't like me, then fuck them. No. There's a certain amount of accountability that is required in any kind of transaction, whether it's business, personal, or just being able to live with yourself. Just being able to just have your own apartment and go to work and have a quiet, simple, honest life to yourself. When I was younger, I had a simple life, and I had no idea how to live that life. I had no idea how to be content with that level of life. I had enormously high dreams, and I had no concept of the fact that I could get to extremely high level dreams by still being content with a very, very small life as it is today. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but people tell me, I hear it all the time, if you want to get high level dreams, then don't be content with where your life is now. Yeah, that's not really what's happening. If someone has big dreams and they never act on them, it's not because they're content with how their life is now. It's because they're not sure what to do. And instead of exploring to see, okay, what internal growth needs to happen, what external growth needs to happen, what what changes need to be made inside of me and then outside of me to make this particular thing a reality, instead of thinking like that, they're just kind of stuck in fear. So they're not being like discontented. They're just kind of like frozen. They're like a deer caught in headlights, And that's normal. That's perfectly normal. But what I didn't understand when I was younger is because right now I have a much bigger life than I had back when I was younger. I had enormously big dreams, but I actually had the ability to be content in a very, very small, simple, by myself life. I had the ability to do that, and I did not have the mentality to pull that off, because I thought, well, if I want a big dream, if I want the big life, if I want a bigger life than I have now, then I've got to constantly be never being satisfied with where I am now. Well, the truth is that made me so miserable with where I was then that no foundation was laid. No layers were built up. I wasn't going, okay, well, I'm content with how my life is now, and I'm working toward a bigger goal, but right now I don't have all the steps. But I do know that the first step is to be content with where I am now and to have a deep contentment in that life, and to be okay with being, okay, I have a very simple, tiny apartment. I have a very simple, tiny job. I'm able to feed myself. I'm able to pay my bills, and nothing else matters at this point. It's okay for me to live inside of this little life. But instead, I overspent. I overindulged, I over-traveled, I overdid everything because I just kept thinking, no, I'm not supposed to have this life. I'm not supposed to live this simple, contented life in this within my means. And so it never occurred to me that if I wanted to live with bigger means, that didn't mean that I live outside of my means. That meant that I continue living within my means, but I work on my means a little bit at a time, little bit, and get better at it incrementally. And my ability, my ability to grow my means will grow along with that. I had no concept of that, And I don't know, different people are different, Caleb. I know that you are a very unique individual. I know that you're different from me. I know that you're different from Nolan. I do see some traits that you have in common with your mom. But I know that, and I don't know your dad, but I want you to know, Caleb, that, you are, there's no one in this world who's able to be you. No one is able to be Caleb Butler. No one's able to be who you are as a person. And that means that you really need to understand yourself. You need to understand who you are as a person. What makes you you? What makes you so unique? If 5 people were given the exact same job and they were trained on that job in the exact same way, they're still going to end up doing that job not only a little bit differently, but eventually very differently from each other, because their own internal nature are going to take over, and they're going to start to kind of cover up the training with their own internal states of mind, which is why continual training is often recommended, so that people are all working from the same playbook. But Caleb, there are gonna be things that you struggle with that nobody in your family struggles with. And there are going to be things that you're very, very good at that nobody in your family is good at. And you're not going to always have the support system within your family that you need in order to understand these things about yourself out in the world, in the world around you. And so you're going to need to know yourself really well. You're going to need to know what type of temperament what you have, what kind of nature you have. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the things that you struggle with? What are the things that you're afraid of? For me, the things that I'm afraid of are the things that I'm going to tend to try to do those things first, because if I'm afraid of them, I want to conquer that fear. But at the same time, if the fear is too high, if I'm too afraid of those things, I might just avoid them, because we all either try to overcome our fears or we try to avoid our fears, So if there's certain things that you're just afraid of, yes, those are your weaknesses. No, you don't have to work on them right now. Maybe you could work on them a little bit, like little tiny amounts, like little incremental changes. That way you're no longer afraid of those things, but you're not like trying to master that subject or something like that. You're not like trying to master something that is your fear. You just want it to not be as much of a fear anymore. More of a kind of a, well, that's not really something I want to get into, but at least I'm decent enough at it that if I need to do it, I can, A lot of the things that you're going to encounter in life are going to happen when you're by yourself. This is something that both introverts like you and me and extroverts like Nolan and your sister, Cambry. I keep wanting to call her Cassie, and I was like, I know it's not Cassie. Nolan and Cambry are extroverts. They draw energy in from other people. They're very affected by other people. And introverts, we draw energy from deep within ourselves. And so we have to be by ourselves for a certain percentage of every day so that we can refill our own internal reservoirs. And Caleb, that's something that you and I have in common. But I want you to understand that even introverts we have our own weaknesses when we are by ourselves. There's an old saying, you don't live with someone else unless you can be happy living with yourself first. That's true for both introverts and extroverts. That that's not like there's not an exception for one side or the other. That's not there's no exception to that. If you can't live with yourself and be happy, you can't live with anyone else and be happy. It's just not possible. And so when you're on your own, there'll be times when you have your own place, you have your job, you're self-sustaining, you're self-contained, and then all of the demons inside of you that perhaps have been sleeping, that have been lying dormant, that you never know what's going to come out of you. All of those demons will suddenly stretch and wake up and be like, "Hi, Caleb, what's up? Let's come out and play." And that's going to happen a lot. That's going to happen a lot. And there will be, those demons have to be conquered first before you can go out and live with someone else. Or like, move in with a girlfriend, or I don't recommend that. I don't recommend living with someone outside of marriage because the commitment that marriage requires that both people be on a better level of behavior. But living together like roommates, if it's a romantic situation, that's a level of casualness that doesn't actually sustain the relationship very easily. And it makes both people not fully feel like they have the other person, but they still have in other words, it makes both people feel like they have the obligations of marriage without actually having the privileges of marriage. So I don't recommend living with someone before marriage, but there is, I know that, your family did that, but I've done that myself, and it felt fake. It felt like what it was. It felt like it was just a game that we were playing. It didn't feel real. But I will say that the commitment that it takes to marry someone is such an enormous thing. It requires such an internal transformation within that person that it makes it a big enough step that people, they have lived by themselves, and they've lived with roommates, and they've lived with friends, and they've done all the things of layers of self growth before they commit to marriage. That by the time they get to marriage, they're in a pretty good state. Caleb, one of the things I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about the importance of the 5 love languages. This is something that, for some reason, people started using this phrase, I would say about 10 or 15 years ago, and it got online, and people just started attaching the phrase love language to just random things, like, oh yeah, snoozing in the sun is her love language. Oh yeah, and they'll just attach it to just random things, like going to riding roller coasters is his love language. That's not what that is. So let me explain what happened. There was this guy named Gary Chapman, and he was an anthropologist for many years. And as an anthropologist, he was studying how groups of people, that's what anthropology is the study of groups of people, how they interact with each other, how they interact with other groups of people, and how they all get along, economically, culturally, through linguistics, through behaviors, through traditions. And that's what the study of anthropology is you're noticing patterns in groups of people, in subgroups of people, and you're noticing what the different cultural traditions are, and how you get into the group, and how you stay in the group, and how you get out of the group and you stay outside of the group. And anthropology was this guy's first field of study. Then later on, he got a degree in psychology, which of course is very one-on-one or one-on-two. And he opened up a psychology practice, And because he had this anthropology background, he learned that people, they, he noticed a pattern in the couples that kept coming in. They would, they would tend to complain about certain things. Each person in the couple would come in and complain, oh, she doesn't do this enough. Oh, he doesn't do this enough. And he noticed that there was a set of patterns that pretty much like included, like all the patterns could be grouped into pretty much 5 groups. And that's where the origins of the phrase, the 5 love languages, that's where they came from. They came from a book that he wrote called The 5 Love Languages. And each love language, what it is that people, I don't know if they're just internally like this or what, but I'm going to tell you my story, Caleb, and you're going to need to hear this because my story is one of not being self-aware. And I'm known for my self-awareness, but that doesn't mean that my very smart and clever brain can't still hide things from me that I'm not psychologically able to handle, okay? So you have to understand what my my very smart and clever brain is very powerful, but that also means that if it's going to deceive itself, it deceives itself very well, okay? So the book is called The 5 Love Languages. It's by a man named Gary Chapman. But I'm going to go over what they are. Like, for example, I don't know what Nolan's is. I really don't. But I know that your mom's is physical touch, which is the same as mine. Now, when I say physical touch, I mean physical touch in a non-sexual context. Everybody uses physical touch in a sexual context. That's across the board, okay? A lot of guys who have a biological need to ejaculate. I know this is all very embarrassing listening to your aunt talk about this. I'm so sorry. But they consider themselves to be a physical touch love language when they're not. Remember, this is physical touch in a non-sexual context. Everybody across the board, all 5 love languages use physical touch in a sexual context, okay? So you're just a regular guy or you're just a regular girl if you have a high sex drive or a regular sex drive or a sex drive in need of stimulation or whatever. You're just a regular person. That does not determine your love language. What matters is are they touchy-feely? Are they into hugs and snuggles and everything in a non-sexual context? And that's something that that I am and that your mom is. But Caleb, something you need to understand is that I knew about the 5 love languages since I was 11. My mom read that book to me when I was 11, and we were hiding out in Waka when she had stolen me away from my dad. And what happened was, even though I read that, because I was being physically abused at that time by my mom, and because I was also in massive physical pain from my disease that I had, that she helped me create when I was a child, because that disease was active, because of that situation, my body was in so much pain all the time that even if I was clear-headed enough to know what my love language was, I would have questioned it over and over and over again, because I had such a deep-seated need to be taken care of physically that was not being satisfied, because I was being violently abused and my disease was pushing calcium out from the inside out, and it was active and it was still very, very painful. It didn't go into remission until I was 12, okay? But Caleb, you have to understand that even though I knew about the 5 love languages when I was 11, I didn't actually know what my own love language was until I was 28. That is 17 years of not knowing myself that well. It was only after I had been dating since I was 14. So that was 14 years of dating and having boyfriends and stuff like that. And I looked back on my dating history and it clicked. It was so obvious to me. Oh, you're obviously a physical touch love language, because your decisions around guys were based upon that particular fact. And that was something that I literally didn't know about myself until then. So that's something that, because of the kind of traumas that I went through, the internal and external traumas that I was exposed to, even though I was a physical touch love language, I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that my need to hug and squeeze and love on and kiss people and just walk up to them and pet them like a dog, I didn't know that was because I loved them, and so I wanted to caress them physically, again, always in a non-sexual manner. This is without that context. This is in a non-sexual context. So that was something that I didn't know about myself, Caleb. And that's something that, even if you read the book, even if you read about all the 5 different love languages, and you think you know which one you are, you may not know about yourself until later as well. Not because you've been exposed to a lot of trauma. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. I don't know. I don't know what your life has been like, Caleb. I really don't. But Caleb, I do know that you're very smart, and I know that you're very wise, and I know that you have a really good head on your shoulders. And I have a lot of faith and belief in you, in the way you organize your future life. And I want you to know that if you are in a relationship with a girl and you feel like you're alone all the time, it's because you're not speaking the same love language. And Caleb, you will need to know what yours is, and you will need to know what hers is, and you will need to match the two together. In other words, you'll need to find someone who matches yours before you get married. Because marriage is going to be 80% more difficult. There's going to be a certain amount of work that goes into marriage, just like it goes into any relationship. But there'll be another 80% of work on top of that, another 80% of pain. We're talking about actual pain and suffering on top of that for people like your mom, for people like my friend Kay. They both are physical touch love languages, and they are in long-term marriages with someone who is not a physical touch love language. And that makes them suffer. I see your mom suffering, and I see Kay suffering. And he's married to, Kay is one of my friends, and he's married to someone, they've been married for 32 years. And I have never seen someone suffer so badly. And his wife suffers just as badly, because she's not having her love language being fed to her at all either. And Caleb, it's possible for 2 people to learn each other's love languages and to become self-aware enough to feed that to each other, and that will ameliorate a lot of the pain. But Caleb, you might as well just remove that extra 80% of pain and suffering. You might as well just remove it from your future marriage, okay? By knowing what you are ahead of time. And Caleb, you may not know right away. I didn't know right away. For 17 years after I knew about what they were, I didn't know what they, I didn't know what I was. And Caleb, I want you to understand that just because I'm able to speak multiple love languages doesn't mean that I receive love through anything other than hugs and kisses. I really feel loved by that. I intellectually understand the others, but my heart feels loved by the physical snuggles that I get from my friends and my family. And that's something that I really just didn't understand that about myself until I was 28. So, and I'm not saying it'll take you that long, of course not. You're way smarter, you're way more capable than I was when I was younger. But Caleb, I want you to understand that your world has complexities in it. It has traits in it that you're gonna walk into something in your world. You can walk into some sort of business situation or work situation or relationship situation, and it's gonna suddenly be like you don't have any context for it at all, because you've never encountered anything like it ever. And that's gonna happen to you a lot. In the first 10 years of your adulthood, it's gonna happen to you so many times. It'll just flatten you. It'll just go wham into your head, and you'll be like, what was that? What the hell just happened? And that'll happen a lot. But as you get older, these systems of what to do in each situation, what to do in each context, these systems will start to become clear to you. You'll know what to do. You'll know how to do it. You'll know how to respond in different situations, and you'll get better at it, and you'll get more practiced at it. And then you'll start to get more refined. Whereas in this particular situation, I'll do this, but in this slightly different situation, I'll do this, and you'll get to that level of mastery. I'm laughing because of the big pile of stuff that I've been piling up the stuff for my trip, and now I'm just looking at the big pile of stuff behind me. It's so funny. Anyway, Caleb, I want you to know that you've reached adulthood now, and you're in this stage of growth that is to go out into the real world on your own, to be your own man, to be self-sufficient, to take care of your own needs. All of that requires a massive amount of energy to just support the basics. And I think that some young people think that, well, I should be doing better by my level of growth. I don't think that's true. I think that in order to just support the basics, it will take a lot out of you to do that. And if you go in there expecting that, if you expect that I'm not going to try to make everything, really big or really small. I'm going to try to just live a nice, basic, simple life and just take care of my needs and my bills and nothing else. And I have a couple of forms of entertainment that don't cost me money every, all the time or whatever. In other words, nothing like smoking or, a pool hall or something that every time you play, you have to pay to play. Something that, you can buy and just own and be entertained by it, or you can buy and go out and use it, like on a bicycle or something like that, which I'm sure at your age, you're like, a bicycle? Are you kidding me? But I mean, seriously, there are simple things that you can set up for yourself that even to entertain yourself, that thing is taken care of. That thing is accounted for. And I want you to know that just setting up a nice, simple life for yourself, not too small, not like stingy, and not too big, not too like having high expectations for a little tiny paycheck, but just a nice, simple, basic life for yourself, where incrementally every so often you get another piece of furniture, you get a little bit of extra food, you get a little pay raise, just a nice, simple life for yourself. That will still take pretty much all of your internal strength that you've got. That will take your emotional strength, your mental strength, and your physical strength. And that will take enough. And you'll be like that for a while, and it's okay. I want you to understand that it's okay. That's not playing too big or too small. That's, if you're able to maintain a very simple, basic, bare bones lifestyle, but that where all of your needs are being met, you're being entertained enough, you're being educated enough, you're able to sustain yourself, you're able to read or go out and do something fun with your friends, but it doesn't cost money. That kind of situation, that kind of lifestyle is something that can be easily maintained. And it'll, in the beginning, it won't feel easy. In the beginning, setting it up, it'll just take a lot out of you, and it'll continue to take a lot out of you for a while. And I want you to expect that. I want you to expect that not everyone's going to be at a high level, right away. That's not going to be like that. In fact, hardly anybody is at a high level when they start out, because that just takes a lot of emotional reservoir. Caleb, I also want to talk to you about the fact that your physical strength, your emotional strength, and your mental strength will all be taxed. Your spirit will be taxed. Your spiritual strength will be taxed. You will be taxed throughout the day with new and varied situations or stressful situations that, whether they're new or not, anything that's stressful, you'll be taxed with that. I want you to expect that to happen. I want you to understand that you're going to need to live your life in such a way that it's basic enough that you have extra reservoirs of emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual strength, so that in case something goes wrong or something unusual happens, or you suddenly need to learn a new skill or be around new people, you'll be ready to, you'll have extra reservoirs of that strength to put into that. But if you are living your life to where every day is taking everything out of you just to live every day, again, in the beginning of being self-independent, in the beginning of being self-sufficient, you're going to be like that anyway. But after you have been an adult for a couple of years, that should start to normalize for you. And if it doesn't normalize for you, then you might be living your life in a more stressful situation than it should be lived. You might need to evaluate, okay, I really don't need to be dealing with this stress, and I really don't need to be dealing with this drama over here. Why don't I cut both of them out of my life? Oh wow, I suddenly feel a lot better about my life, So I want you to understand that every day you have a certain amount of physical strength. Every day you have a certain amount of emotional strength, and every day you have a certain amount of mental and spiritual strength. And if you don't allow, if you don't allow those things to have rest in between each. Do you know the principles of muscle building? When you build your muscle, you have to work your muscle in a very slow, controlled manner for, the reps that you're doing, and you try to work it near, not to muscle collapse, but near muscle collapse, and then you leave off for 2 or 3 days, and it's the 2 or 3 days that the muscle gets repaired. You don't work out the muscle in that time. The muscle builds during the repair days. It does not build during the exercise days. The exercise days is where you shred the muscle. The repair days is when the muscle gets built up all nice and bulky. The same thing is true for your emotional strength, your mental strength, and your spiritual strength, is that you need to allow there to be some taxing on those things, but don't allow it to continue going on continually without any stop. Allow there to be breaks for you to rebuild your emotional strength, your spiritual strength, and this includes like social skills. Caleb, you and I, we're being introverts. We don't really want to be around people like Nolan and Cambry do. Oh my God, Cambry loves being around people. And if she's all by herself, doesn't she get bored because she doesn't have enough stimulation? You and I, we don't really have that problem, do we? We're like, I'm good. I don't need to be around people to be stimulated. I'm good to go. Well, the thing is about that. Developing high-level social skills for me meant that I had to set certain requirements. When I was 13, what I did was, because I was intensely shy when I was 12 because of how disfigured my body was. My nature is very close to how it is now. It was like that then, but it didn't show up ever. It never showed up like it is now, because I was so shy. I was afraid of being around people. So what I did was I forced myself into an exercise where I would say, okay, every time I go out in public, every place I go to, I introduce myself and say hi to and introduce myself and chat for 3 minutes with 3 different people. And that was a goal that I set myself. And every time I went out, I would walk into a place and I would pick my 3 people. I would walk up to each one of them and say, hi, my name is Rita. What's up? And I would talk to them and we would chat for a little bit, and then I would go to the second person and then the third person. And then me and my dad would leave. Usually he would go in and do something really fast and then be waiting on me to finish my talking. But what that did was that forced me to stop being afraid of talking to people, which I used to be just terrified of. I was so shy that it was like talking to people was such a drain on my emotions, But I set myself these simple tasks, and once I had forced myself to do that for long enough, my social muscle was really built up at that point. It was like really built up. So, Caleb, I just want you to know that now that you're entering the great wide world, the world around you is practically infinite. There's an infinite variety of people. There's an infinite variety of work. There's an infinite variety of relationships. There's pretty much nothing that you can't have. There's pretty much nothing in the world that you can't have. But you need to know what things make you comfortable now, so that you can do those things now and stay mostly within your comfort zone now. And over time, you'll expand your comfort zone a little bit more, a little bit more. Nolan will be like, you can't stay within your comfort zone. You've got to get out there and push yourself. Okay, yeah, that's great if you don't have a loving family behind you, and if you're not intelligent like you are, that's great if you have nothing to lose. But if you want to completely replace your entire personality, fine. But the truth is, Caleb, the human mind can only take on 10%, a maximum of 10% of newness at a time, of things that are new at a time. Okay? So you don't have to put yourself into highly stressful, super emotionally intense situations all the time in order to grow as a person. No, it's not necessary. You don't have to do that. You can just be a little bit uncomfortable about something until you grow to understand it a little bit more, get a little bit better at it. Take a rest, be in familiarity for a while, and then be a little bit uncomfortable in another direction, and just little by little allow that newness, that new situation to soak into you, where you understand it better, you absorb it a little bit at a time. That will make you to where you're able to pretty much continually grow with very little break. But if you try to take on 20% new, again, like I said, people they don't do well underneath 2%, but they really max out at 10% new at one time. Okay, so that's what 90% needs to be familiar, 90 to 95% needs to be familiar, 5 up to a maximum of 10% needs to be new. Okay, so you need to like plan on things like this. You need to know that in my life, if I'm going to set up, being self-sufficient in my own little place with my own little job, in order to do that, right now everything's going to be new. But the more I get familiar with this over and over and over again, the less new it will be, and then I'll finally get down to that place where Aunt Rita told me to be, 90 to 95% familiar at all times, and only 5 to 10%, maximum of 10% new at all times. And Nolan is an overachiever like I am, and Nolan likes to push himself because Nolan didn't grow up with a deep-seated, sense of self and I didn't either. We both were drug ourselves into adulthood with body parts, strung out behind us, all bloody and gorged, and just all the and shredded body parts behind us as we dragged ourselves into adulthood. So me and Nolan, we didn't have that center of self that you have, Caleb. So you need to understand that you don't have to go through, you don't have to force yourself into ultra stressful situations that last for a very long period of stress time, in order to grow. You don't have to do that. You can grow just 5 to 10% of newness at a time. Okay, you don't have to overdo it like that. And I'm saying this as someone who overdoes everything in their life. So, like, if I'm saying it, then it really means you really don't have to do it. So, all right, Caleb, I wanted you to understand that when you go into the wide world around you, I cannot tell you how big the variety is. I cannot tell you how enormous the variety of jobs are that are out there. I cannot tell you the enormous variety of people that are out there. I've met tens of thousands of people, so has Nolan, and we just love the variety that is out there in the world. The situations, the circumstances, the places where you can live, the types of relationships that you can have. You can have friendships, you can have girlfriends, you can start a family. Caleb, there's so much that you can do in your world. And I want you to understand that just because there's a wide variety of things doesn't mean that you have to do everything in order to know what you like, but it also doesn't mean that you have to stick with only one or two things ever. You can hunker down and do your work that you're doing right now, and occasionally kind of, get up above the fray and kind of look around and be like, okay, well, after I'm done with this work, I think I'm going to go over there and try that, So I don't know if that was helpful at all, but Caleb, I'm Aunt Rita. I really care about you. I really care about you and Cambry and Colby and Cole and Chase. I'm trying to remember the names of my own nephews. My God. Anyway, I'm making this video for you now. I was gonna try to make it in New York, but the people that I'm staying with in New York, their schedule changed, so I'm making it now from my incredibly messy, completely disrupted because of all the moving room. So anyway, you can knock all this off. But so I'm making this for you now. I wanted to make it for you from New York so that you would have New York energy coming at you. Because I'm an intuitive, so intuitive dominant people, we like to give people different types of energy. But instead you get Washburn energy, so good on you for that. Alright, well, obviously I'm having a hard time finishing this, so happy graduation. I love you. Take good care of yourself.